Hi everyone. In the previous videos, we had shown you how to uh, create a very simple program to access the database. In this video, we're going to show you how to clean up this code a bit, actually quite a lot of it. This code is not reusable, it's not testable, it's difficult to understand. And frankly, there's a lot of complication when accessing databases using any programming language. It can be a bit tricky. And so we're going to create some specialized classes that do very specific things. So we're going to create a database access object, which sole purpose is to talk to that database. And then we're going to create, of course, the Java beans that actually hold data. And so that DAO object will basically create a list of Java beans and then returns it to whoever wants it. So we're going to be loosely following this DAO design pattern when accessing databases from our website. Again, this is a cleaner way of writing code that's more maintainable, more testable, and just better. Again, I just grabbed this one at random from tutorialspoint.com, and again, I'm going to be loosely following it. But the core idea behind this design pattern is over here we've got some code that's going to use data access object. So in this instance, they have a student database access object that's an interface. And then we've got an implementation of that interface down here. Now, again, I don't really like how they've done this. I think this could be more generic, but again, the core idea remains the same. Now, this implementation is going to fill a bunch of student concrete objects. For our websites, they're going to fill a bunch of Java beans. And so the student data object is going to create a connection to that database. It's going to request all those students. It's going to make a list of all those students and return them to whoever calls or whoever wants it. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Again, I'm loosely following this one. I'm not going to follow it exactly because I'm not a huge fan of it. So in my Elves workshop, in the previous video, I had created this package. It's got my hello databases.java. I'll go ahead and leave it. It's not going to hurt anything. In production code, I would recommend taking it out. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new package. Again, to follow MVC, I'm going to create a cvtc.javaweb.elves, and then I'm going to create a .models package. Again, I'm going to try, again, there's the display bug where, oh, look, it's working correctly. Oh gosh, that's exciting. Thanks Eclipse for working the way you're supposed to. Okay, well, I'm going to go into this models, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new interface. And I'm going to call this interface data access T. And this data access interface is going to specify the methods that any data access object requires. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. The first method I'm going to add to this get access interface is a get all method. So this get all method will take no arguments. And this get all method is going to return all records from that database. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import the Java util. I'm going to do, we'll leave it as .list, that's fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another class. And I'm going to call this the elves data access. Excuse me, I'm going to call it, instead of data access and writing it out, I'm going to call it elves DAO. We'll go ahead and click finish. And we're going to say this elves DAO implements the data access interface that we had specified before. Now, this data access pattern that it's going to have, the elves DAO is expected to return a bunch of elves Java beans, so I need to go ahead and make another class called elves Java bean, like so. And we'll leave that for now. Again, this data access, we're going to need to pass in elves Java bean. Okay. Again, this we're getting the red squiggle now because we got to add in our unimplemented methods. And there we go. Now I'm going to add a few more things to this elves DAO object. I need to add a elves DAO constructor. And this elves DAO constructor is going to create that connection that we made in the hello databases and hold on to it. So I'm going to create a new private variable called a new private connection called connection, and we'll set that guy equal to null. And I need to import the java.sql library. I'll do .star for that one because we need a lot of functions and objects from that. And in here, I'm going to do the same steps that I did in here. So I'm first going to load the drivers using class.forName, and it's going to be org.sqlite.jdbc. So we're going to load those drivers. We're going to go ahead and add a throws declaration to our constructor. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create that connection using the driver manager. What I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to add some getters and setters for this connection here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say generate getters and setters. I want these getters and setters to be private. Nobody else should be accessing this connection object. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do call set connection, and I'm going to use the driver manager to get that connection. Again, we need to pass in the connection string, which in this case is going to be jdbc : SQLite : and then the path to that database that we had created in the previous video. Again, I'm just going to pull that path here. We'll copy and paste that in. There we are. It's mad because it doesn't have its own handle, so I'm going to add another throws declaration here. This line is a bit long, so I'm going to move this dot connection. I don't know. I guess it's okay. It's a pretty long line. I think it's fine though. I'm not going to clean that up any. So again, when we instantiate this elves DAO object, we're going to load the drivers we need, and we're going to set a connection. Now, what we're going to do in the getAll method is we're going to basically grab all those elves from our elves database. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to follow the steps that we had done here. Basically steps 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, but in the getAll method of the database access object. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a statement. I'm going to call it statement, and that's going to be equal to get connection dot create statement. And then I'm going to go ahead and more unhandled exceptions. I'm going to surround this with a try catch. Again, if I add this throws declaration up here, it will immediately break my what I've created in my interface. So I'm going to use a try catch block in this case. And because the statement is inside a try, I'm going to move the declaration outside of the try. So we're going to do statement equal to null. So again, I've just moved the declaration of the statement object outside of the try. Again, if you move it inside the try, bad things will happen. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to write a SQL string, and that's going to be my select all from elves, semicolon, semicolon. And this will select all the elves. And I think what I'm going to do inside this catch is I'm going to basically do a throw new runtime exception. I'm going to pass in the SQLite exception. So I'm going to wrap this SQL exception into a runtime exception and throw that instead. And that's how I'm going to handle all exceptions, basically. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute that statement, and I'm going to store the results into a result set. Now again, I don't want to declare the result set inside this try. I'm going to declare the result set here. So I'm going to do result set is equal to null. And then I'm going to now query the database using this statement. And I'm going to store the results into this result set object. So that's result set equal to statement dot execute query, and the string we're trying to pass in, the SQL code that we're going to pass in, and we'll store that to a result set. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, that will execute the query in theory, and it should store the results in the result set. My getAll function expects me to return a list of elv Java beans. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make that now. So I'm going to create a new list of elves Java bean. And we'll say, you could call this all elves or elves. I might do that. Let's call it elves. And this is going to be equal to a new array list. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this util.list to .star. I'm going to import all the classes there. And then the very last line of code, I'm going to return all the elves. That'll make the code stop complaining. Okay. Now, just like in the hello databases, I'm going to loop over each record in my result set. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say while result set dot next. I'm going to then, this needs to be in a try-catch block. So I'm going to go ahead and move this into my try-catch here. There we are. There, I'll stop complaining now. Okay. So I'm going to, this is how I would loop through each of those result sets. Now, again, I haven't made anything in my elves Java bean, so now I'm going to make an elves Java bean to hold basically the same data that's in our database. So I'm going to quickly make a private ID, just like a, gotta have the type, private integer ID equal to integer dot min value. And again, this Java bean is just going to hold the data from each of those records. We'll say private string first name. Set that to the empty string. Private string last name. Empty string. Private integer age equal to integer dot min value. And another private double. And I believe that was the elves weight because I'm not feeling creative. Java beans need to implement the serializable interface. Gotta go ahead and import that library now. And all Java beans need to implement public getters and setters for all these values. So I'll go ahead and do that. Using my tool and generate getters and setters. We'll go ahead and select all. They do need to be public, and we'll click OK. I add some white space here to make this a bit easier to read. There we are. Why is this giving me a warning? That's right, I need to generate a serial version ID. Clean that up. Again, there's no reason to have a getter and setter for this variable here. You never want to change that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a constructors for my elves Java bean. So first I'm going to generate a constructor. I'm going to deselect all. I'm going to make an empty constructor. And then I'm going to generate yet another constructor. And I'm going to select all the fields. Like so. So now I've got my default constructor, and I've got my constructor that will construct from the ID, first name, last name, age, weight, so on and so forth. Now, back into my elves DAO. What we can do now is we can use this loop that is iterating over the records in each result set. It's iterating over each of those records, and then we're going to create a new elves Java bean from that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new elves Java bean object. Let's say elves Java bean, and we'll say elf to me, elves Java bean, like so. Okay, now we're going to use this loop to fill the contents of this elf Java bean. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to null. Inside this loop, I'm going to say elf is equal to a new elves Java bean. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the ID, first name, last name, age, and weight of that elf object that I just made. So I'm going to say elf dot set ID. And we're going to use the ID from our result set. So we're going to say result set dot get integer. And again, the index is in the first column. And we're going to do elf dot set first name using result set dot get string. First name is in the second column. We'll do elf dot set last name using result set dot get string, and that last name is in the third column. Likewise, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do elf dot set age using result set dot get integer, and the age is in the fourth column. And finally, we're going to do elf dot set weight using the value from result set dot get double. Dot get double, and using the weight is in the fifth column. So again, this is going to make a new elf. We're going to set that elf's ID, first name, last name, age, and weight from this record result set. So again, this is how we're going to parse the result set, and we're going to parse that by index. Finally, what we're going to do is we're going to add that elf to my array list here. So we're going to say elves dot add, and we're going to add a new elf. There we are. Good. Good. This code will again create a statement. It will execute a query. It will execute some SQL. Which will return a result set, and then we'll loop through that result set. We'll fill a new Java bean with the ID of that elf, first name, last name, age, and weight, and then we'll return that to the user. So what we can do then is now I'm going to make, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use this hello databases. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a servlet now and show you how we can access all of these elves from our servlet. So I think I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just like when I'm adding a servlet, we're going to do new package, and we're going to say cvtc.javaweb.elves.controllers. We'll click finish, and I'm going to add a new servlet. And I'm going to call that the elf servlet. We'll click finish. Okay. And so in this elf servlet is where I can create that elf data access object and actually use that data access object and use the elves that it returns. So the way I would do that is I would create a new private elves DAO object. We'll call it elves DAO. And we do need to import the elves DAO. We need to import the models, the elves DAO from our models. And we're going to assign this guy to be null. Now, when the elf constructor, the elf servlet constructor is called, we are going to set elves DAO equal to a new elves DAO object. And we're going to basically surround this with a try-catch. Again, for each of these, I think I'm just going to change this to exception. I'm going to take a couple shortcuts here. And I'm going to basically wrap any exceptions that get thrown in a runtime exception. So I'm going to say throw new runtime exception. Pass that in with E. So again, this will take an exception, wrap it in a runtime exception, and throw that instead. So there we are. That's how we could create our new elves DAO. And we could use that elves DAO in this doGet method. Now, I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's say we create a list called elves. Let's create a list of elf Java beans and iterate over that. So we'll create a list of elves Java bean. And we'll say elves. And we'll assign this equal to our elves DAO that we created right here. So elves DAO.getAll. And this will return all the elves that are in our database. Now this is going to be a little mad. We need to import util. We need to import our models. I'm going to go up here and I'll change this to star. I'll change this to star as well. And while I'm at it, change, I'll leave that guy alone. So this will fill all our elves. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly loop over each of those elves that we pulled out of this getAll method. So I'm going to say for elves Java bean elf in elves. Bad C# habits, we need the colon there. Elves. And this will loop over each elf in our elves list. And so what we're just going to do is we're just going to quickly system.out.println those. And we'll say elf.getFirstName. Okay. There we are. Now if I was to run this servlet, I'm going to right click and we'll do debug on server. Yes, always use the server. Excuse me, you couldn't find it. Why not? Oh, I've got this servers folder closed. If you're doing this, make sure to open up the servers project. All right, let's try that again. Yep. Finish. And again, we're just trying to print out the first name of all those elves in our servlet. And you can see Steve, John, and Mary appear here in the console. Again, I don't have the servlet returning anything. We're talking to a JSP. Again, I'm just outputting them here, but you could easily pass this alone into a request attribute. You could do something like this: request set attribute in elves, and you could pass all the elves into a JSP file. You could use that to iterate over all the elves, just like very similar to like you've been doing with other projects. In the other projects, we had just an array list. Now we're talking to a database and filling another list object. So it should, from the controller side, it should be pretty similar. The only thing that's really different is this elves DAO object and then the databases, of course. So that's how we can basically create a database access object pattern that improves the maintainability, testability, and overall code base of our dynamic websites, and how we can fill a list and from a result set and return that to a servlet and pass that to any of our JSPs or just like we had been doing. So that about wraps it up for this video. In future videos, we're going to expand on our DAO, our elves DAO a little bit. And we're also going to look at parameterized statement. So again, thanks for watching.